The global economy is doing very, very well. There's no question about that. The US is going extremely rapidly. Europe is still doing very, very well. Canada is doing reasonably well. The question we have in our mind is whether or not we've hit an inflection point, which is to say, growth is no longer as synchronized as it used to be, still strong, but not as synchronized as it used to be. And we're starting to see a bit of a downgrade in growth forecasts. And one of those places we are downgrading, oddly enough, is in the US, where we think trade-related uncertainty, just as it's having a bit of an impact in Canada, is going to have an impact in the US. American firms are clearly starting to respond to what's happening on the trade side. You've seen Harley-Davidson announce some moves. Other firms are being affected. The aluminum and steel price increases are substantial, 40% increase or so in steel prices in the US. These things have an impact. They increase the cost of production, and those have to be absorbed by businesses, either in their profit margins or in prices. So we see this happening in real time. So you see farmers complaining, you see the business community generally being pretty against what's happening on the trade side. So all those things are accumulating, and we think will lead to a bit of an increase in uncertainty on the part of firms as we go into next year. Uncertainty means that you're not spending as much as you otherwise would, that you're keeping some powder dry. And in the US context, even though growth is very strong, the US is the engine of growth of the global economy. So if US firms start to think a little bit differently about the recovery, start to think a little bit differently about their prospects, it means they hire less, it means they invest a little bit less, and weaker growth almost inevitably means a little bit weaker growth in other parts of the world. So one of the dangers with the track the US is on trade policy is that it leads to an all-out trade war. Trade wars are bad for everybody. We talk about the recessionary impacts in a place like Canada, but first and foremost, a recession would be felt in the US. So when you're talking about a trade war, you're talking about things that damage the US very substantially, possibly a recession. If there's a recession in the US, chances are very good we have a recession in Canada and possibly other parts of the world as a result of these actions. Tariffs represent an increase in cost for firms, and they raise inflation, so they reduce the purchasing power of households. So they're fundamentally bad. There's no question about it. This is bad, bad, bad for the US. It's bad for the rest of the world. And you think of the auto tariffs, for instance. If the Americans decide to do that, done out of a need to protect their domestic industry, is how they're calling it, but fundamentally it's an increase in US car prices of $10,000 or $12,000 a vehicle. How can that not be bad for the US economy? How could that not slow consumption in the US? That's not our base case. We think rationality is going to prevail. We think the idea that trade wars are easy to win, as President Trump has indicated, is a little bit simplistic. You're seeing some damage right now in the US as a result of the very minor things that have happened. We anticipate that that's going to lead to some degree of restraint on the part of the administration, on the part of other countries as they engage with the US to try and avoid this very, very bad outcome, which would be a trade war with China or a trade war with other parts of the world.